It is Saturday, the 15th of April, 2017, and welcome to this episode of Code Evolution. Excuse me for having this what sounds like a really bad cold, because that's exactly what it is, but I was really inspired to kind of do this video because I felt like it was something missing. It's going to be quick, but I wanted to show people the power of interfaces and how, some of the things that people don't realize and how powerful they are. This is primarily for people coming from languages that don't have interfaces and are, say, like migrating to TypeScript or maybe any other language that does. If you're someone who's already familiar with interfaces, this probably will still have some value for you if you've never seen this before. So what I'm going to show you guys is interfaces are really, really powerful because you're able to essentially build your architecture ahead of time. So just a note, I am using Visual Studio right now because Visual Studio has built in a UML builder. So what I'm going to do here is if I go into new items, let's make this quick, say class, looking for a class diagram. There we go. And, we're just going to say main. So what we have here is something that Visual Studio offers you, which is a UML designer or a class designer. And what you can do is we're only going to do everything with interfaces today because that's going to show the power of what I'm talking about. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here and we're going to come up with something called I.2D. I, obviously, because interfaces, there's a convention with that. Not necessarily in TypeScript, but definitely in other language, you want to put an I in front. All right, so now we've got I.2D. We'll go ahead and get all of our interfaces in here, and we're going to do I.3D. Also, obviously, could drag if I want to. Doesn't matter. We're going to do now we're going to do I rectangle. Okay. We're also going to create something called I resize 2D. Okay. And we'll start from there. Now we've got all these interfaces. Let's say you're starting out and you're developing an architecture and you don't want to get so deep into the code. You want to sit there and plan with your team. You want to be like, oh, how are we going to do this? And by actually generating a UML like this or a class diagram, you're setting forth the plan and making sure that it makes sense and that it's going to work. And then when somebody goes to write the code, they basically just have to implement these interfaces. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the basis for all the stuff in here. First, for I.3D, we're going to add a property, and that property is going to be X. And we're going to add another property called Y, right? Point3D is going to have a special property called Z. So for I resize 2D, we're going to have a method called setSize. Okay. And for rectangle, we're going to add a property width and height. Great. So these are all of the unique properties for each one of these interfaces. Now we can actually do some cool things where we can actually go straight to the code and modify it. So for I.3D, we can say, this being C#, we can say I.2D. So now we have an interface that has X, Y, and Z. We don't care about how it's implemented. We just want to demonstrate what the requirements are. So we know that this has X and Y, and then also Z, and that any I.3D is also easily castable as an I.2D, right? So that's another benefit. And then you can see here in our class diagram that it automatically draws an arrow and says, oh, okay, there you go. Now for I resize 2D, all I need to do again is double click and it takes me to the code. Now this method is not what I wanted. I want to do more. So I want to have a number. We'll go ahead and use doubles. And so setSize has a double for width and a double for height. And this is again just for 2D. All right. And now we can come in here to rectangle and we can say, oh, and of course we can also put I.2D in here. So now if we go back to our diagram, you can see that I.2D and I resize 2D are part of the equation, and you can see that the inheritance points up in here. Now with this all set up, you can imagine I could keep going and going, right? For example, let's do one more situation where I'll say I'll add an interface and I'll go I resize 3D. Okay. Okay. And then we're going to create a interface called iCube. And with iCube, we just have one unique property we need to make, which is depth. Okay. Then with iCube, we can come here and say that it's iRectangle, iPoint3D, and iResize 3D. Now there's a couple other ways you could do this, but this kind of gives you the gist of how it should work, right? And again, we get this nice kind of definition, different arrows pointing to where the inheritance is happening. And as you can imagine, you could make a giant map that kind of defines how this stuff works. You might find better ways to arrange it. There is an auto arrange, I think, here. I'm going to say layout diagram. That's a bit wonky, but let's say if we can do that, we can kind of flip this over here, and there we go. And there's a little bit better layout, right? So the thing I want to show off here the most is keep in mind that after I did all this, and again, they're only interfaces, so it was just planning. It's not just planning though. That's kind of the cool thing. So now with our Solution Explorer open, you can see that all my interfaces were already built for me. And I mean, they're done. We didn't really sit here and write much code, right? We actually did everything through essentially a visual designer, which is really nice to be able to see what the relationships are, and maybe, you know, with other people, when you're looking at this kind of stuff, it might be more useful. It's up to you if you think this is useful or not. So as you can imagine from here, I could easily build out my classes, and I could follow this pattern from this point on. So if you're someone that is more on the sides of implementation, you would come to this and you go, oh, I know what you need me to do. Someone who's on the more architectural / designing side of the architecture, they could continue to build everything in interfaces. Now, some people might think, well, that's overkill. Aren't you writing things twice? Well, yes and no, because the thing about it is with interfaces, at least this isn't necessarily true for all languages, but in some languages like C#, you have different types of things. Like you have interfaces, you have structs, you have classes, and interfaces allow for this. Basically, if you're casting to an interface, it doesn't care if it's a struct, it doesn't care if it's a class, it just cares about what can I do with it, right? The interface makes sense, then go ahead and use that. So you can essentially tag everything as an interface, and it becomes compatible across maybe even multiple different things. So you'll see this quite often if you're not familiar with dependency injection schemes, where basically you're going to be using interfaces a lot. The reason for that is that you need to be able to, say, replace a class with another class that still follows the same interface, because you need one for execution and you need one for testing, right? So yeah, it might seem like you're writing it twice, but it affords and presents, if you do everything with interfaces, if all of your input parameters are interfaces, then you're not locked in to that specific class, and it becomes very useful down the line. That was it, guys. I just wanted to do a video. I know it's been a while. I kind of woke up this morning and was like, whoa, I haven't really covered that. Why not do something on how interfaces can be, used in modeling in UML, and kind of go from there. So if you like the video, give it a like, subscribe for more content like this, and we'll see you next time.